Hi, this is Dustin back with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about Knightscope, their cash flows, and this line of credit, source of funding, whatever you want to call it, that they have from Dimension Funding that they announced in April of 2021, I believe. And I'm going to talk about the impact that that has on their cash flows. I haven't really seen anyone else talk about this, so I wanted to go over it. Before I begin my discussion, let me remind you that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I have a long position in Knightscope. So basically this position should be for your this video should be for your entertainment purposes only, because I could be wrong about everything that I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, as I said today, I'm mostly going to be focusing on this Dimension funding that they have. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the news today that they deployed a robot at a healthcare facility in Los Angeles. And again, I think each individual sale is really not that significant at all. I don't expect it to really be a big deal. It's nice that they announce it so that we can kind of I can update my tracker and have my best estimate of how many machines are deployed, which my best estimate, assuming zero cancellations, which you can fill in whatever number you want in terms of what you think their cancellation rate is. But I think if they've had zero cancellations, we look at their publicly announced sales, they would have 93 machines deployed as of today. And again, I think they don't announce every deployment. And I think they, we have no idea what their cancellation rate is. So we don't actually know how many machines are deployed right now, but it's fun to try to predict, and it'll be fun when they actually start having these quarterly reports, since they're public, and we can I can sort of see how horrible my prediction was. But the one notable thing is, once again, they do call out they have this client has almost 40 hospitals and over 700 medical facilities, so they are landing these clients that are large and have the potential to multiply, to sort of land and expand is the term that I've heard other places, where they sort of get their foot in the door with the customer, and then if the customer finds value out of it at one location, they might then decide that they want to deploy the robots at other locations. So that's a good sign. So getting into the meat of today's talk, I assume that most of the Knightscope investors who've done their due diligence have seen this slide or some form of it in a prior incarnation that goes over the unit economics for the robots. And let me even make that bigger to see if I can make that a little easier for y'all to see. And this is important, right? This is the story that they're telling in terms of how these robots are going to be profitable for them. And one of the big things here is to really understand how their cash flow is, right? In year one of deploying the robot, they have to pay, they have extra service costs because they have to deploy the robot, and obviously they have to pay for all of the materials in the assembly and shipping of the robot itself. And so that is a lot of money that they have to pay in year one. Now, if their clients renew for year 2, 3, 4, and 5, because they estimate that the robots should have a useful lifetime of 5 years. At least that's the way that they're doing this math. If they do get those renewals, and that's what they're obviously banking on as a company for their economics to work out, then in years 2, 3, 4, and 5, you don't have to build the robot and you don't have to pay to deploy it. You have to service it all the time, right? The whole time that it is in actually deployed. You're going to have things that break and, routine maintenance, I suppose. I don't actually know completely, but presumably you're going to have some, sort of ongoing service costs that will be incurred over regular intervals, and you kind of never get away from that. However, again, you don't have to pay for the robot. You don't have to build the robot again. The software updates are done over the air. So none of those turn into actual cash costs in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. Again, assuming that the client does renew for the full 5-year lifetime of the robot. And if we have this situation, their ideal economics, and again, we haven't seen this play out with exactly these numbers in their prior filings. They've even warned that we probably are not going to see the numbers play out quite like this in the near future because of impacts with supply chain shortages and the pandemic. sort of messing up some of their orders and some of that stuff. But this is what they're targeting. I have to have at least a little bit of faith in management that these numbers are credible. So if you look at their unit economics, even with these more, let's say, idealized unit economics, you can see that they actually lose money in year one. So every sale that they make not only takes a bunch of money up front from them, right, because they had to build the robot and deploy it, all of that. Even as they're getting these monthly billings from the customer, at the end of the first year, they still are down in terms of cash. So every sale does literally leave them at the end of a year 51, even with this ideal economics, that they're not quite even, their economics are not even quite this good yet, leaves them with $5,100 less dollars in their bank account in terms of actual cash costs. So that's, that's tricky, right? Because if you look at the math, it does work out, assuming that they can get their costs down, that, hey, after years 2, 3, 4, and 5, now all of a sudden your profit margins look great in terms of cash, right? Because you keep getting those billings from the customer. You only have to pay for the service on the robot, and you get to pocket a pretty big difference, right? And that's where William Santana Lee, the CEO, likes to describe this as, after year one, you get sort of, what does he say, like luxury automobile economics or something like that. Basically means your profit margins are pretty high in those additional years. And this even works out. You can see, look at the numbers there. This even works out even if a client only renews for a second year, right? They don't have to have the robot for 5 years for it to become profitable. They're profitable after, pretty soon into year 2. But this does create a scaling problem for the company because, hey, let's say tomorrow we sell, Knightscope sells 10 robots. Well, holy crap, that's a lot of cash that they need right now. And they're not even going to get back to the same amount of cash they had before they made that sale until more than a year in the future. So this is a scaling problem for the company because they can't actually make a lot of sales because they would literally be losing money in the short term to do that. And they'd have this cash crunch and they just run out of liquidity. And I actually wonder if this might have been some of what happened in the past in 2018, 2019, when the company did have some issues in terms of liquidity. Who knows, right? But I think even looking forward, this is a scaling issue because the company is not exactly flush with cash. I mean, I think they're in a good position right now, but if they, they're not EBITDA profitable, and they're burning through that cash to fund operations right now as they try to grow more. And if they're actually then losing money on the sales, like that creates a bad situation where the more sales you make, the more cash you're out in the short term. So what are they doing about this, right? And so I'm getting to the point of today's talk, and that is they had this Dimension Funding, right? A financing partnership with Dimension Funding that they entered into on April 20th of 2021, and I think that was right after a round of funding. I think they raised enough cash so that then this other company would sign it. They didn't exactly state it that way, but that was implied. But they, again, under this financing partnership under which the company will offer clients with the option to finance their machine as a service subscriptions over 12, 24, or 36 months. This financing relationship will enable Knightscope to recoup its costs more quickly while providing improved payment flexibility to clients. So I thought that, that was a nice footnote to read and to hear. And so that was pretty cool. But when you really model it out, it gets pretty in the filing. Not that big of a deal. But so I did actually click through. I think this is in their semi-annual report, and you can read this here that actually has some of the details of the agreement with Dimension Funding, and you can see that a couple things out of here, right? That this is they can refer their clients, their vendors and customers to Dimension Funding. They can do this for 12 to 60 months, right? And so they can actually align this with whatever the contract length is with the customer. Now, the interesting thing is it actually does list in here, it gives a little bit of insight. And I'll be honest, I did not read every single word in this filing. I kind of skimmed it. But the interesting thing here is it looks like they're giving their clients 0%. So there is at least some incentive for the clients to go through and use the Dimension Funding, or at least there's no negative incentive, right? They're not paying to do this. They're not taking on any particular liability. They don't already have by virtue of just signing the contract with Knightscope. But Knightscope is then giving them this is why they're actually doing this, to be able to provide the 0%, is Knightscope is saying, okay, great, but we'll give you a discount in terms to Dimension funding in terms of what you what cash you have to front to us. But basically, if I understand this correctly, and again, not professional, so maybe I got something wrong, but if I understand this correctly, Knightscope is able to refer their client that signs a contract with them to Dimension Funding, and somehow this provides them more flexibility in how that client pays. But what this does for Knightscope is Knightscope, instead of just billing the client every month and every month getting 1/12 of what they would get over the course of the year from that customer, they are able to get all of the cash up front, less a discount, right? And so if it is a 1-year term, it's a 9% discount. If it's 24 months, it's 11%. If it's 36 months, it's 12%. And so then what I looked at was I kind of recreated took their unit economics that they provide in their presentation and divided those up equally over months, other than the first month, in which case you have it looks like a bit of an extra fee probably for deployment. And then you have the actual cost of deployment and the service costs and the additional cost to build the robot in the actual, the machine costs, right? But otherwise, every single month is the same. I just divided up these numbers here, these annual numbers, by 12. And so you can see every month after the first month, I should also say, I think this is realistic for the revenue to just divide that by 12. The service costs, I don't know exactly how that contract works. I've mentioned in the past that they have some contract with Konica Minolta, and I would guess that these costs are actually lumpy, and that the 14,500 number that they put down here is probably just an average. It might actually be 14,500 for one service visit by the technician to go do that, but maybe they expect that to only happen once a year, for example. But just for the sake of kind of having reasonable numbers here that don't have random spikes due to unpredictable service costs, since I can't predict them. I don't have that data. I just split up evenly over every month. So net every month, other than the first month, they are getting $37.85 in terms of cash flow to the company. And so this rightmost column here is the cumulative cash flow, right? This is adding it up every single month. So in the first month, they're actually out by almost $47,000. And then every month they kind of get an incremental a bit of cash back until they finally break even in month 14. And if I put this into a graph, right? And so the blue bars are the revenue that they actually get each month, and then the red line is just the cumulative cash flow. And you can see it starts out negative and just a straight, straight slope line up, and it again breaks even in month 14. Now, what does this look like if they have a 1-year term with Dimension, where they're able to get 91% of the cash from the year up front in month 1? So they get that 91% of that original annual revenue that they would get. I assume they still get the full revenue for the deployment, because they probably just straight bill that to the client. And then everything else here is the same, except then they don't actually realize any revenue for the rest of the first 12 months from the client. And then they start getting that revenue again in month 13 at the end of that 1-year period. So if you look at the cash flow here, they actually they do end up going negative by a bit over the course of the year in all these months that they have, potential service costs, but no revenue coming in. But as of the first month, they are actually slightly positive. It basically just offsets it for Knightscope almost exactly. In that first month, they go slightly negative throughout the year for whatever service costs they have for the robot. So that's still, not great. But then, then they become, they break even again in actually month 15 here, because they ended up getting less money from Dimension because they give that 9% discount. However, they're losing a lot less, right? Their maximum drawdown, if you will, is about $10,000, $10,500 per robot that is sold. So that's a lot better than going $47,000 down with every sale. And they actually don't get to that negative 10. They don't get to that negative 10,000 point here until month 11, whereas here it's sort of they actually hit it almost the exact same point, except it's that's their lowest point in terms of cash drawdown from these sales. And so that's the impact if they have a 1-year contract. if they're able to get the 2-year contract and front that revenue for 2 years, then it looks great, right? Because they get a bunch of cash on month number 1. They do draw that down over the course of the 2 years, but they still are positive that whole amount of time, right? Because they were able to pull forward so much of the revenue. And this is really, sorry, actually, I don't know if I scrolled down to the graph on this one. So let me go back to the 1 year. This is what that graph looks like, right? You get revenue in month 1, just a little bit from the deployment costs, and then nothing until month 13. But then you sort of see this line that goes slowly down as you have service costs. And again, I actually don't know how much they pay in service costs. It may be that they're able to defer, if the robots work well enough. For the most part, they're able to defer that service in the first year, in which case they might actually be able to stay cash flow positive. If they could defer any service on the robot until month 14, they'd stay cash flow positive with this deal entirely, which would be great, obviously. But if they have this 2-year deal where they get again, there is slightly even more of a discount. It's 11% rather than 9%. But if you look at that, then they're very cash flow positive over the whole time, right? Their minimum point is they're up by like $24,000 or something. So that would be fantastic. Obviously, I don't know how many 2-year contracts are going to get. I would guess 1 year is a lot more common. But I don't know, maybe Knightscope is able to offer some amount of discounts to those clients if they sign 2-year contracts and go through Dimension, because it's sort of a win-win in the sense that, if it allows Knightscope to be cash flow positive. I have no idea. That's pure speculation on my part, but I'm just calling it out how that has a nice positive impact for Knightscope. So, all right, that is everything that I wanted to cover